Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope you all can hear me. We've reached the bottom of the hour, and welcome to this very interesting panel today. First of all, a big thank you to the Hong Kong Institute of Certified Public Accountants for having us. I'm Jonas Bergman. I'm a senior editor in Hong Kong with Bloomberg News. Here today to discuss the challenges of audit firm culture, quality, and the issue of professional skepticism are three very distinguished people from different sides of the industry. Ms. Jacqueline Wong, a partner at KPMG, Mr. Ben Rees at the Hong Kong's FRC, and Mr. Len Zhui representing the IASB. We'll do this against the backdrop of the latest FRC report, which found in inspections that more than 80% of audits showed instances of inadequate skepticism. We'll delve into many sides of the issue here over the next 50 minutes or so, and then wrap up with a 10-minute Q&A from the audience. You can type in, if you have questions, you can type them in the little Q&A box. First of all, it's always good to define the parameters. So let's kick off with a rather broad look at how our panelists perceive the nature of audit quality. First off, what does it mean to you, Ben? And then Jacqueline and Len can give us their perspectives.
Hi, thank you very much, Jonas, and welcome everybody to this morning's session. Audit quality is around trust and confidence in financial reporting. A more sort of technical term or definition, high quality audit is an appropriate audit opinion and disclosure in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework. But in order to perform high quality audit work, the auditor needs technical expertise, but also an inquiring mind. They need to challenge management, and that's needed throughout the audit. And audit firms' culture is very important in being able to provide the framework or the right environment and support for auditors to exercise professional skepticism and perform high quality work.
Jacqueline?
Thank you, Jonas.
Mm-hmm.
So we recognize audit quality is important to enhance investors' confidence in financial reporting. And when misreporting does occur, it does erode the level of market confidence. And as Hong Kong is an international financial center, audit quality is important to each and every one of us. But audit quality is not only an issue for auditors. We are only one component in this financial reporting ecosystem. And the stakeholders, such as attendees of this seminar, all have a role to play in audit quality. For example, company and its directors and management as preparers of financial statements. We have board and audit committees, those charged with governance who approve the financial statements. We have the standard setters, audit regulators, and professional bodies who are there to enhance the standards and to apply an appropriate level of oversight while giving the profession an opportunity to change and improve. And finally, we have the investors and the general public as users of the financial statement. So we all need to work and interact together if audit quality is to improve. And from an auditor's perspective, the firm's culture is critical, as Ben has indicated, to our ability to deliver audit quality and to restore the public trust. And audit quality in turn includes exercising the appropriate level of professional skepticism on a daily basis. And the starting point is our code of ethics for professional accountants. It sets the fundamental principle of our integrity, objectivity, and professional care, as well as our independence. And the key to the firm's culture is setting the right mindset in the talent pool to drive the right behaviors and values to ensure a consistent approach, to ensure our purpose, our value, and our contribution is embedded in everything that we do. We need to be agile and receptive to change.
Thank you very much. Len, from the standard setters perspective, audit quality.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I just want to say that on behalf of the IWSB, I want to thank HKICPA for holding this webinar. I also appreciate the Hong Kong audit profession for your work in promoting and achieving audit quality. So from standard setting perspective, particularly from an international standard setting perspective, we've been struggling with the definition of audit quality. So it's good to have this a webinar. I totally agree with what Ben has said, trust, and also what Jacqueline said about culture. But from our discussion with the various stakeholders and firms, including other standard setters and regulators, audit quality is a complex subject, and there's no definition or analysis that has achieved universal recognition. But I think from a standard setter perspective, particularly at the IWSB, the purpose of an audit is important to focus on that. That is to enhance the degree of confidence of intended of financial statement users. So from that perspective, I want to stress that as a starting point, it is important for the audit profession to take on that responsibility to fulfill all the requirements in the professional standards, including compliance with relevant ethical standards and uphold the values of being a public accountant. From standard setter perspective, auditing standards provide an important foundation supporting audit quality. In particularly, the standards describe the auditor's objectives and establish minimum requirements. However, majority of the requirements in the auditing standards either provides a framework for judgment made in an audit or need judgment for auditors to properly apply those standards. So as a profession, I think a standard setter wants the auditors to make sure they fulfill all the requirements. That's a starting point. I think there's a linkage between high quality auditing standards driving auditor performance to achieve audit quality. So based on that premises, standard setter need to make sure that we work with regulator closely. I think Janice, you talk about at the beginning, the FRC report. As a standard setter, as an international standard setter, we look at the FRC's report. We take that seriously and also identify areas where the standard setter can do a better job in improving standards. So I'll turn it back to you, Janice.
Thank you very much. I think you all discussed it in some way, but maybe we can delve in a little deeper here. But I mean, what do you see as the responsibilities of the different parties within the financial reporting ecosystem to improve the quality of audits? And maybe you can also highlight a bit what exactly, what you see as the major fault, the major sort of pitfalls in audit quality right now that need to improve. Len, maybe you can start.
Thank you very much. So from my perspective, I think there are various stakeholders. But before I talk about various stakeholders, let's just step back a little bit. I think people tend to forget that audit is based on a reasonable assurance framework. It is not an absolute or guarantee framework. So there are inherent limitations in an audit. So without being too technical, these inherent limitations highlight the needs to understand various roles and responsibility of various parties in the financial reporting ecosystem. I think it's very important that having the regulator driving the direction agenda, then with the standard setter supporting that agenda, then hopefully based on the standards that drive performance of the audit. But if you look at the auditing standards, management, those in charge of governance, intended user, practitioners, auditors, regulators, all those terms are prominently featured in the auditing standards. Without those in charge of governance overseeing the audit process, working with the auditors, it's hard for both the auditors and management to have a focal point in that ecosystem. And as we all know that those in charge of governance also responsible to the shareholders, to the investors. So investors and shareholders need to work with those in charge of governance and provide proper oversight of the management that provides the financial information. So those are the linkages. If you look at the auditing standards, you look at ISA 265, clearly there's some obligation between those in charge of governance also with the auditors. And regulators finding regulatory law, regulation, compliance are a very important part in the auditing standards. And lastly, for all the pieces to work together, please don't forget that professional accountants in management, in business, they also have to comply with the relevant ethical code. It's not just the auditor need to comply with that. So at least from a standard setting perspective, all those things I talk about are prominently featured in the standard setting frameworks. So with that, I'll turn back to you, Jonas.
Yeah, thank you. Ben, maybe you can follow up here with the regulator's perspective on this.
Well, no, I absolutely echo Len's comments around the different parties involved, and it is a wide group of people. It isn't just the auditors, and I think that can be a misconception that only the auditors are responsible or have a role to play in the quality of financial reporting and audits. You know, as the audit regulator, as the independent audit regulator, you know, our goal is to improve audit quality and the quality of financial reporting. We directly inspect auditors to assess the quality of their work and compliance with professional standards, and not only individual audits or engagements, but also the firms as well and their systems of quality control. But in our public reports, we highlight that not only auditors, but also audit committees and management all have, you know, vital and important roles to play in improving audit quality and financial reporting. You know, management needs to provide high quality information and explanation to auditors, and audit committees need to actively supervise both the auditors and management, and also to see that management has the necessary skills and resources to provide high quality information. You know, directors, as Len said, directors need to remember that they have the ultimate responsibility for financial reporting, and that's something that sadly is not always seen in Hong Kong amongst audit committees. You know, auditors, management, audit committees, regulators, stakeholders such as investors, you know, all need to work together. They need to exercise or take their responsibilities, and whether we want to say that that's holding other parties to account. So for investors to make sure that the directors are doing their job, the directors and audit committee are actively supervising, monitoring, ensuring there are the right conditions for high quality financial reporting and audit, as well as obviously on the regulator side that we are holding auditors to account. We do, you know, we have a limited scope as the FRC. You know, under the Financial Reporting Council Ordinance, we are primarily regulating auditors. We do also have a remit where we can also hold companies and company management to account for poor quality financial reporting, and we are increasing our exercise of that power. If we look at some of the other regulators, the UK FRC, for example, also has power to regulate directors, and I think that is a, you know, from my perspective, I think that is a welcome development. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure Hong Kong's quite ready for that yet, but yes, just coming back to the overall point, absolutely, it's not just auditors, but you know, a large number of people from standard setters through to investors all have an important role to play.
Yeah, you mentioned monitoring directors. Are there any other areas where you would maybe see an expanded remit for the FRC or to help?
I don't think necessarily an expanded remit from the FRC. I think what we are doing is we're working more closely and will continue to work closely with the other regulators in Hong Kong, so particularly the Securities and Futures Commission. We're also looking to work with, you know, the HKMA and other industry bodies as well, so that we have a more joined up regulatory landscape, so that we do work with each other, because we are aware that we do have limitations on our remit, certainly at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Jacqueline, you, from your perspective, from the auditor's perspective, we heard here that your colleagues here admitted that you're not the only ones responsible. Can you give us your view on this?
And I echo all the comments that they made, and And it is a recognition not only of them, but all the other stakeholders that attend these seminars as well. And from an auditor's perspective, we indicated that one of the key things that we can do as individual auditors, as an audit firm, to enhance professional skepticism, which is one of the focus areas, is that mindset. And applying and adopting that mindset is both a personal and a professional responsibility for all of us. And it's influenced by our skill sets or our behaviors, as well as a code of ethics, as mentioned by Len as well. So it starts with the people and the talent resource. And as an audit firm, what we need to do is help cultivate that mindset, to develop a culture that promotes this behavior. And for example, we encourage our talent to ask the right questions, to encourage or engage in a healthy level of debate and challenging questions, or constructive challenge. To acknowledge that by applying this mindset, it does lead to difficult discussions or conflict. It gets us out of our comfort zone, but we need to support one another when that occurs.
Mm-hmm. Right. Investors were mentioned here a few times as well, Jacqueline. Well, how is your interaction with investors? How do you see their role in the ecosystem?
So investors have a role in being active in the system, being responsive to, and being understanding actually what is the role of an auditor, what is our duty, and what does an audit actually comprise. Len mentioned earlier that there is a mismatch of market perception or understanding of what an audit is and our role and our purpose under the current auditing standards. We only do give reasonable assurance in our work. We don't give absolute assurance. That is fundamental in the work that we do. And there needs to be an understanding of that from the users of the financial statements.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. Let's get back to this term we discussed at the beginning here. I think Ben also mentioned that it was important to have an inquiring mind, and the key in the FRC report was the lack of skepticism, and this has been a continuing problem not only in Hong Kong but elsewhere in the world. We'll lead in with Ben here and to get his perspective on sort of the lack of inquiring minds or skepticism and what can be done to improve this.
Okay, thank you, Jonah. So yes, just going back to our 2020 annual inspection report, as you previously mentioned, over 80% of the engagements that we inspected had one or more findings of a lack of professional skepticism. And this was evident across all sizes of firms. And in 70% of those cases, those 70% of those findings were significant. So these have a direct impact on an audit's inspection quality rating. Our common findings were lack of evidence and challenge of key assumptions, and also a lack of challenge over the business rationale, especially in identifying and responding to the risks of fraud. And these findings are consistent with those of other regulators, although from our inspections last year, they were at a much higher frequency than you would get from other independent audit regulators, which have been in operation for a number of years and have had an opportunity to make an impact in those areas. But a lack of professional skepticism may be caused by either auditors not realizing something needs to be challenged, or perhaps there's a commercial decision not to challenge. In both of these situations, the firm needs to drive a culture of an inquiring mind and in challenging management. And while we highlight specific deficiencies in our report over a lack of exercise of professional skepticism, and we give examples of that, it's also worthwhile looking at our inspection of the firm's systems of quality control. So these are the policies and procedures that give the firm reasonable assurance, again, that term, that audit opinions will be appropriate and high quality work will be that the high quality audits will be consistently performed. So while the audit partners and the engagement teams have the responsibility for audit quality, or the firm also needs to provide the right culture and systems and processes, the framework, if you will, to enable these judgments and decisions and challenges to be made. You're absolutely right that this is a persistent issue, and it can't just be down to individual audit partners or individual audit teams or individual engagements. And really the firm needs to, as I've said, provide the right culture in order for auditors to be able to exercise professional skepticism. So, to create the culture where auditors are reminded that they work for the shareholders, they work for reporting to the audit committee and not to management. They need to remember that purpose. The firm needs to provide the right coaching and training, that skepticism be embedded in training and competency frameworks, not only for training, but also used for evaluating and rewarding partner and staff performance. And key to this is also supporting audit partners when they need to make, take and communicate difficult judgments and difficult, decisions. Firms need to support partners when they need to push back on, for example, reporting deadlines, and also give engagement teams the right time and right resources to do that. And I think that is where a lot of our work is focused and will continue to be focused, is not just identifying individual instances where there is a lack of professional skepticism, but looking at the culture of the firm, making sure that remediation actions and root cause analysis are performed appropriately. The firms take the opportunity to fix that, and we're the implementation of the new quality management standards, which all firms will need to implement, is a very good opportunity, and is something that we will be looking at greatly as firms look to implement that next year, and then when it becomes effective from the end of 2022, that is a great opportunity for firms to really look at their culture, look at, are they providing the right environment and tools for firms and individual engagement teams to perform high quality work and exercise professional skepticism.
Yeah, thank you. Len, from the Standard Setter's perspective, is there how do you improve this lack of cultural skepticism that Ben describes?
Thank you. Thank you. From standard setting perspective, we read, we follow all the inspection report over the last 10, 15 years. I think this is one area that clearly the standards can be improved, but it's not just on the auditing standards, but also on the ethics standard as well. So some of the more recent standards and also some of the new standards, you're going to see professional skepticism prominently mentioned in our standards. Before I talk about some of the changes, let me just focus on, I think this is something that standard setter has to work with the regulator as well as the profession. I think one of the core principles for being a good set of auditing standards is to make sure that standards are clear and concise for the practitioners to apply, but also more importantly, standards are written in such a way as to be enforceable by regulators. I think those are very, very important. I think in the past, in the area of self-regulation, when standards are set by the profession, it tend to be very vague. I think going forward, you're going to see some of the more recent standards, you're going to see more clear, concise requirement that's going to be enforceable by the regulator. So, and also because it's enforceable by regulators, it's clear and concise to a practitioner exactly what they need to do. So we're still in the improvement stage. But one of the things we talk about professional skepticism is you're going to see every standards going forward issued by the IWSB to have paragraphs providing guidance in applying professional skepticism. For example, some of the new recent standards such as risk assessment, auditing estimates, And also Ben talk about the quality management standards, the three standards applying a firm at the engagement, also engagement quality review stage. You're going to see the expression professional skepticism prominently mentioned, also additional guidance in the application material. And also as part of improvement process, we do have a professional skepticism working group that provide advice and real-time review into our standards, how professional skepticism are being applied in the drafting stage, and whether there are areas for improvement and also are clear and concise for the practitioners and the regulator. So these are some of the high-level professional skepticism effort we will try to do at a standard setting level. But later on in this discussion, maybe I can pinpoint some specific examples.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Jacqueline, there's a lot to work with here. It seems like how do you, as a firm, instill the culture and promote and foster the professional skepticism in your people specifically?
So I agree with comments made by Len and Ben. There's a lot of change that's upcoming. Changes are being made, and as a profession, we need to be ready for that change and to be agile and to adopt it. I mentioned earlier about mindset change and the need to have that in our culture, but it starts from the top. But one thing that we do to take a look at is also our training, whether it's classroom or on the job training, and we take into account that critical thinking or a skeptical mindset is a skill to be learned. Okay, it's not something that we have that automatically are born with. It's a skill that needs to be learned. And developing that questioning and inquiring mind is different from a compliance or checklist approach. Okay, it's different from a compliance or checklist approach. And exercising that professional judgment is more than applying the mechanics of the audit process. And once our profession understands that and moves towards that a skeptical approach or mindset, we are better off. We also need to motivate our talent to reinforce their purpose and value in this whole entire reporting ecosystem, so they feel empowered and confident to fulfill their obligations and their changing obligations that's upcoming. And as indicated by Ben, people should be encouraged to raise concerns or issues on the table, because we want poor behavior to be called out. We want to improve audit quality, and developing our talent with that right mindset and a supportive environment and culture is important. And once you have that in place, then you look at the tools and processes. As Ben said, system of quality and control in place that helps and promotes a skeptical mindset and rewards and recognizes and reinforces that right behavior is important.
Yeah. Is there a culture? Is there a problem with a culture of not to challenge, as Ben mentioned? Do you think, or?
I think there is a. I would say there are challenges in the sense that there are competing factors that impact our ability to challenge. For example, preparers of financial statements. Not all of them are receptive to change. Not all of them are receptive to us asking difficult questions, asking for information. And that's where some of the issue comes up. Are the audit committees challenging their own management team? Are they preparing materials of a good quality? Having that good engagement and interaction with the company management as well as the audit committee is important and helps us deliver audit quality as well.
Okay, thank you. In a little along the same vein, maybe Len, is there a focus on growth that trumps audit quality? Is that an issue?
Thank you. I think this is one area that the IWSB has done quite a lot of research in this area, and as part of the quality management working group, I spent a lot of time talking to independent auditors around the world, as well as the securities regulators. So if you look at the quality management standard that Ben mentioned, ISQN1, I think one particular paragraph is very important for the practitioners, also very important for the regulator. is paragraph 28. It talks about governance and leadership. We talk about financial operating priority might undermine audit quality. So in the standards, this is a result of a lot of research and also engaging with the regulators as well as the investors. We specifically talk about the leadership has to be accountable. So one example I heard from one of the IFIA member. IFIA is the international forum of independent audit regulator. So they gave us an example. This example is at the engagement level. So you have an audit engagement partner who's focusing on make sure that the engagement is properly supervised, directed, and reviewed. But all of a sudden that he's getting a phone call during busy season. The firm's leadership asked him to fly to another city to do a marketing proposal. So this is a real life example that the firm's leadership should be focusing on making sure the engagement partner's primary responsibility to perform high quality audit, not interfering with that performance of engagement, asking the engagement partner to drop everything he has to do to fly to another city for business development. So this is one example that we heard from the regulators and how that example has been translated into the standards going forward. Hopefully paragraph 28 will provide some clear guidance to the firm at the leadership level, also to the regulator when they do inspection, when they look at system quality management, the accountability of the leadership. This is one paragraph that the inspector can focus on to make sure that the firms and practitioners uphold, the quality management objective.
Yeah, that's very interesting. There's a lot of it's a busy world out there, and for everybody. And I was wondering if Ben could discuss in terms of the lack of skepticism that you found. Is there a sense that there's perhaps too much work out there, or a chase for growth that is sort of plays a part in this as one of the issues, or?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it's, just to echo the points made by Jacqueline and firms and auditors, they're commercial organizations. Mm-hmm. They're not public utilities, and there is that pull or contradiction between obviously making profit and performing high quality work. Ideally there wouldn't be, but there are these competing interests. And from our inspections, sorry, my lights have just gone off.
Oh, yeah, looks good now.
Automatic lighting. What we've seen in some of our inspections from the quality control system, where firms, partners are rewarded for business growth. There are a number of firms, even some of the larger firms, where they don't have audit quality as a KPI, or they don't evaluate auditors on audit quality, that they're, or even for partner promotion. And you would think that would be a basic prerequisite of an audit partner, that they're actually able to do quality work. And similarly, not just partners, but also other engagement staff, that there can be far too much focus on growth and budgets and winning new business, and that can be at the expense of performing high quality work and exercising professional skepticism. And I think we do need to recognize that exercising professional skepticism takes time. It's not a box ticking checklist. I've done these 4 steps, and I've ticked off this, or I've vouched that. It's professional skepticism takes time to plan, identify risks, and respond to that. So there is that. There's also, on a wider level, firms where they don't invest in adequate resources or tools. So while people may be rewarded, or it not being a factor in their evaluation on audit quality, the firms may be unwilling to invest in providing the right environment, the right resources, tools, training, whether that's really having enough staff, but also having enough time and making sure that people aren't required to do too much work. So one of the other areas that we do look at, and we've highlighted in our report, is how do firms monitor partner and staff workload? Do they actually have adequate systems to make sure that people aren't overloaded, and therefore they have time to make those decisions and to push back to their clients and obtain the right information?
Yeah, interesting. Jacqueline, we discussed briefly, but I think is there any way in terms of aligning pays and promotions and that can sort of create a better culture of skepticism within the firms? Do you think?
Yes, I think it does, and in our firm, as mentioned by Ben, audit quality is a KPI for our partners. It is front and center on our agenda at leadership, drives all our strategy. For us, we believe quality audit is good business. It is good business. It will attract good and quality clients, which in turn attracts and retains our quality staff. It is a virtual circle. And so it is fundamental in everything that we do at KPMG. Yeah,
it's interesting. I think we've discussed it quite a lot here, but the regulator and the standard setter, the quality management standards published in 2020 and effective in 2022. Maybe you could, Len, you could discuss the ongoing work by the AWSB on this issue with the professional skepticism.
Yeah, thank you very much. So as I mentioned earlier, that professional skepticism has been prominently featured and with additional application material in all the new standards. So quality management clearly is one of the focal area. I think Ben mentioned that firm has responsibility, but also engagement has responsibility. So there's a number of emphasis on from firm perspective, what it means to be skeptical, and also from engagement partner perspective, when you do an audit, during the performance of the audit, and some of the factors, some of the consideration the engagement team have to go through. I think that some new terminology has been introduced. For example, there's a project on audit evidence is continuing, and also on fraud. We're going to see these two standards coming up in the next couple of years. The term consistent, inconsistent audit evidence, collaborative and contradictive evidence, and bias, technology bias. Sometimes the practitioners, management might have bias towards information generated by different IT platforms. So with the evolution of IT system, so there's a lot of IT bias involved. So try to introduce that concept into the standards. And also as an auditor, also management, you tend to look for collaborative information to support your assumption, rather than actually looking for information that actually is contradict to your initial assessment. So those are very important based on some of the findings from regulator. Those are the issues, topics that challenges that profession is facing. So we try to address that. But also in the ethics standards, we're introducing that suspicious mindset. So this is in addition to professional skepticism. So suspicious mindset for the auditor, also for those people in management. I think it's important. I think Ben mentioned that in Hong Kong, they're working with the securities regulator. I want to emphasize the point that professional skepticism also culture. I mean, I used to be a securities regulator in the US. So there's a particular provision in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, post-Anderson and Enron. It's Section 303 of Sarbanes-Oxley Act. It talks about undue influence into the audit process. So if you are management, if you are audit committee member, if you are investors, if you are vendors, if you are banks, if you are interfering with the audit in the US, there's a legal responsibility. and you are accountable for interfering with auditors' work. So speaking to some of my former colleagues in the US, since the passage of Sarbanes-Oxley Act 303, at least in the US, but that's very much a jurisdictional implication that auditors actually can apply professional skepticism at a higher degree because there's a legal responsibility and legal ramification if management, audit committee, investors, and other third parties interfere with the audit process. And Ben mentioned that FRC has limited mandates and authority, but this is something that is impacting the behavior throughout financial ecosystem, and one of the environmental factors actually impacting how professional skepticism are being applied. And lastly, this is a continuous improvement process from standard setting perspective. It's not like we issue a guidance that's done with it. I think Jacqueline mentioned about education and Ben talked about training. There's international standards on education for accountants. Is going to be looking at how we're going to introduce professional skepticism in education at college education, in terms of qualified accountancy exam, in terms of teaching people who has the aspiration at the early age to be accountant, to understand that concept. So there's a lot of grassroots efforts being going on, not just in standard setters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ben, do you see the need also for more education at the sort of the starting point?
I mean, education is extremely important, and not just formal training, but on-the-job training.
Yeah.
And actually, that's we have some concerns of the impact of COVID over the last 2 years, of the ability of junior staff, particularly, to learn on the job when they're working at home. Are they able to get guidance and ask questions from people who have more experience, from the managers, senior managers, from the partners on that? So yes, I think training is important. Just echoing, following on from Len's point, I think the standard setters have a very important role in promoting professional skepticism. A lot of firms, it's easy to think of audit firms as, the large international firms, because they're the ones that get the headlines. But, for across the industry as well, a lot of firms don't have those resources or don't have that experience and knowledge, and they do rely on the standards as guidance. It's not just something that they have to comply with, but they're also helpful. As Len was saying, there is guidance in the standards, there is explanatory information. There is also a lot of other information that, bodies like the IAASB, IFIR, and others regularly publish to enable to inform auditors on what best practices are, and how they can improve on what they should be doing, or how to implement those standards. I think they are extremely important in that regard, and there are obviously the quality management standards, which we talked about, are important, but there are a number of other standards. There was a recently revised auditing standard on estimates, which I think really provides a lot more guidance on best practice and on how to audit key estimates and judgments. I think that's very, very important. For the regulator's role, in promoting professional skepticism, as I've said before, primarily we look at the auditors, and our role is, we need to have the appropriate supervisory framework. So monitoring of audit risk, and that's something that we at the FRC are putting resources into, is our ability to monitor information on as near to a real-time basis as we can to identify audit risks. We have the independent inspection function, and then we also have other functions such as the investigation and discipline. So we have monitoring and inspection to identify bad practices. We have the discipline and enforcement areas, which punish bad practices, can I say? But I think that the other ways in that we try to promote professional skepticism is around requiring firms to do root cause analysis and remediation, so that they identify what are the underlying causes, and that's an area that does need to be improved. I think that the root cause analysis are often a little bit high level, where firms will say, well, we just need to provide more training. Actually, there can be some more important underlying reasons, such as the level of resources, or the time being given, or the level of partner involvement, or other areas that the firm needs to implement policies or review their existing processes to improve on. Other areas where I think we at the FRC have a role is being transparent. We need to be transparent and consistent in what we expect from auditors, so that they know what they're meant to be doing and what they're meant to be aiming for. And obviously that works very much with the standard setters. Primarily, we do inspect the audit team's compliance with those standards. So we want to make sure, if the standards aren't appropriate, then our work is less effective. We've mentioned before that our remit doesn't extend far beyond auditors, but we are trying to do what we can to recognize that it's not just auditors who have a role in professional skepticism, audit quality, and financial reporting. So we, for example, will look at the quality of communications with the audit committee. There is a requirement for auditors to discuss, explain, report to the audit committee where they see deficiencies in internal controls over financial reporting. Is the information that they're getting from management, getting from their clients, of sufficiently good quality for them to perform high quality work? And in many cases, it isn't, but the firms are not reporting that to management. So, I've heard from a number of our regulatees, they complain about the quality of information that they receive, that the lack of buy-in from the audit committees, or that management is not as helpful as they should be. They see it as a compliance exercise. And yet the firms are not raising these issues with the people who have the ability to make a difference and make a change. So while we are limited in our remit to the auditors, we are trying to expand that through making sure that the auditors are helping themselves and exercising their duties.
Yeah, interesting. Jacqueline, maybe you could weigh in on that. You mentioned, do you think the FRC is transparent in what it does? Is it helpful in terms of fostering the skepticism, or?
Yeah, I think it does, definitely. We do have open and transparent communications with the FRC on what they expect from us. What more can we do, and are we moving in the right direction? Inspections, this is the second year the FRC is doing their inspections. This is an opportunity for each of us to continuously improve and make changes, to exchange views. And we take that opportunity to have those discussions when they're on site. And it is important to share those ideas, to share any challenges we might have in professional skepticism, so that it impacts on their ability or the changes that they might do from their end. So we do welcome the change to improve and to apply international best practices in Hong Kong.
Just a quick follow-up too on the issue of education, which I thought was interesting. Do you feel that the new people coming into your firm, for example, are they sufficiently aware of this, or is there too much onus on you to train them when they arrive, so to speak?
So talent, when they come in, they come from various backgrounds and knowledge. We do have extensive training program when they onboard in order to learn our processes and various checklists or whatnot. Is it a challenge? I don't think it's changing our programs to the changing standards. It's developing their knowledge is developing as benefit on-the-job training. They don't come as auditors, preset that they know everything. It is very much learning on the job, building that judgment from experience. And for people who are in the firm to help with that coaching and mentoring in order to build that next generation of talent.
Okay, great. I think we're just about time for a Q&A here, and we've received some interesting questions. One question here I think is probably good for all of you to answer. It's I'll read it out here. Audit quality is closely related to the quality of the client's information. Do you have any views on how to enhance the quality of client's information? Should this be something to regulate? Maybe Jacqueline can start off on that one.
Yes, certainly. So yes, I do agree that the quality of the information that the client provides to us during the course of the audit does impact audit quality, because it does impact our ability to our time commitment that's required, the number of follow-up questions or questions that we might have. How can they enhance the information? Well, we do provide feedback to them. They can tell by the number of questions we come back asking them to provide the additional information. But also the audit committee plays a role as well. When we have difficulties or whatnot in such information, we do raise it with management, we do raise it with audit committee, and they should be actively involved. They should be seeking our feedback and asking, is the client management providing the information that we need? They have a role to play to prove it. If the audit committee does apply that skeptical mindset as well in asking those challenging questions, the quality of information that we receive from management will improve.
Interesting. Ben, would you?
Yes, I mean, I really want to echo Jacqueline's comments and earlier comments that yes, I think audit quality is related to the quality of client information. Is it something that can be regulated? It's difficult to regulate from an external regulator, but the role, the people who regulate that are the auditors and the audit committee. So as I've said, the auditors do need to be able to push back and say that the information is insufficient. They need to report that to the audit committee. One of the things that we do look at from our inspections is there evidence that the client, that management is providing sufficient information? There are instances, unfortunately, in Hong Kong where the information from clients is of poor quality, and the auditor more or less prepares estimates and assumptions for them. They try and do work to prove management's assertion that an entity is a going concern or that an asset may not be impaired. So I think it's difficult to regulate that directly. But coming back to the earlier discussion on all the different parties that are involved in the quality of financial reporting and the quality of audits, that everybody has a role to play in that. Yeah,
interesting. Let's move on to this a second question here, which is interesting. Is there a danger that too much supervisory might put pressure on the auditors to chase for compliance and take the audit as a compliance exercise? This may result in a checklist approach and actually keep them from looking at the big picture and exercising skepticism. Len, what do you think? Is there a danger of overregulation?
I really don't think so. I think one of the principle of applying the standards is the applying professional judgment. I do know that there might be differences in judgment, but I think I made that point earlier that we need to look at from the intended user perspective. See, auditor have to fulfill responsibility. Who's the intended user of the auditor's report? Is the intended user the management, or is the investor a public interest as the focus? So I think if you comply with the standards, if you exercise some professional judgment and exercise professional skepticism, usually you'll get to the same answer as the regulators. Of course, there's going to be a period where regulator and the practitioner are getting used to the independent oversight framework. But as we can see that from at least in a number of jurisdictions over the last 10 years, that I think inspection oversight largely improve audit quality. Of course, there are specific areas that needs improvement that might be becoming a more checkbox approach. But largely, I feel, at least speaking to some of the larger independent oversight bodies, they do respect professional judgment, and you know, they in the inspection process, you know, they do apply that point in time scope that at the time when the auditor look at all the evidence, whether professional judgment has been exercised. So I think the regulator has been pretty balanced in terms of respecting professional judgment, and I do not believe that is going towards a checklist approach.
Jacqueline, do you think there's a danger of it becoming a checklist approach?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think currently with all the changes that are happening, we are moving away from that checklist approach.
Mm-hmm.
And this then goes back to the basis of this seminar. It's a culture change. It's a change that needs to be done by those auditors. That's what when I look at this question, that's what I think. And change is difficult. You know, you get out of your comfort zone, but that is what's required. And people need to recognize that in order to move towards international best practices, you need to initiate that change now. It's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, and it needs to start from the tone at the top, at the various organizations, including the audit firms.
Yeah. We have a couple of questions here on cost, which is interesting. For a small firm, this might be hard to handle. Should we uphold? I think I know Ben's answer to this one, but should they uphold and maintain high quality audit irrespective of costs and resources?
Yes, I mean, you know, this is a commercial decision, you know, which should be agreed at the beginning of, you know, before taking on the engagement. But absolutely, that's the auditor's duty, is to perform high quality work. You can't say, well, I only got paid this much and therefore I'm only going to do, you know, a half good job. Absolutely, that's your priority. That's the basis on which you have your qualification and the basis on which your business is run. If nobody values your audit opinion, believes that you're not performing high quality work, then, you know, why should they buy your services? So yes, you know, I think this also comes into another area that the FRC issued some research on audit fees and shows that audit fees have not increased in the last 10 years. I think that is an issue in Hong Kong. I think generally audit fees are too low. I think audit committees and companies and shareholders should be prepared to pay their auditors appropriately for doing high quality work. I'm sure Jacqueline would be happy to hear that, but you know, I do think that is an issue. But unfortunately, where auditors find that they are in a position where it's becoming unprofitable to do work, then they either need to raise the fees or to withdraw from the engagement. You know, the quality of the work is paramount.
Jacqueline, on fees and costs, is that a challenge for the industry?
No, I mean, I totally agree with what Ben indicated. It's very much a decision when you accept the engagement. You need to ensure you have it properly resourced at the right fees to deliver against the standards that's expected.
Yeah. Okay. One last question before we round up. I think cutthroat competition in Hong Kong in auditing. According to SMEs, auditing is just a compliance exercise. How can the FRC or the standards help the situation? Len, do you agree that there's cutthroat competition and there is just a compliance exercise to most SMEs?
Thank you. It's a very good question. A very good question, and I don't practice in Hong Kong, so I'm not sure about whether I'm a qualified person, but I do want to know that challenges impacting small and medium practices is a global issue. And we talk about cost in the previous question, and also your question dealing with the Hong Kong environment. I just want to supplement that there is a exposure draft out there. It's a separate standards for less complex entities. And the primary focus is to help the small, medium firms in applying the quality management standards, also some of the complexities in individual auditing standards. I think the starting point is the type of engagement you perform that determines, what type of quality management each firm needs to establish. So with that in mind, that exposure draft, the entire standards for less complex entity is only 120 pages long. That includes all the quality management standards, estimates, risk assessment, reporting. So I would encourage that practitioners in Hong Kong in the small, medium market and also HKICPA to have a closer look of that exposure draft, and perhaps from that separate standards we might actually improve audit quality at a less complex entity environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan, maybe you can wrap this up and answer this last question. Is this an issue as you see it?
It is an issue that we've been aware of, and just to reiterate, currently the Financial Reporting Council only regulates auditors of listed entities, which is not going to apply to SMEs, although there is currently legislation that is being proposed that would bring the power of inspection and oversight of auditors of SMEs, of non-listed entities, as well as individual practitioners. So we are aware of this issue. We have heard comments and complaints around the issue of cutthroat competition, which may be caused by part-time practitioners, people who are happy to charge minimum fees, but really doing very minimum work. And we do see that the FRC, should we be provided with the expanded remit to look at auditors of non-listed entities, that is an area that we want to look at, because audit quality, there is a cost for audit quality. There is a requirement for an audit in Hong Kong, which is not consistent with a number of other jurisdictions, but all entities in Hong Kong need an audit, and therefore there should be a minimum level of costs. So what can we do as the FRC? Well, we can actively monitor, depending on the information we're able to obtain. Are there risks? Are there people who are signing 100 audit reports with no resources? Are there areas, and we can target where we believe that there is an audit risk, that audit quality is not being maintained. So through inspection, through disciplinary functions, we can try to, one of our goals will be to improve the quality of audit at the base level by rooting out malpractice. And therefore providing a better playing field for people who are committed to performing high quality work.
Great. I think we've gone a few minutes over, so we'll wrap it up now. I want to thank all of you and all the listeners. Interesting questions, a very interesting talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.